I'm so glad that some of the poets stayed because I just loved that session so much. And I want to know more about, is it Slate Books? I want to know more about that and get all your chapbooks. That was just beautiful. In my next life, I want to be a poet. I'm going to be talking to you today about my 2020 book called I've Been Assigned a Single Bird, a Daughter's Memoir. And I'm just so pleased that you found me, Lise, and you invited me to the Northfield Authors and Artists Gathering. It's really fun to be your outlier Floridian, although somebody had Florida in their poem there for a minute. And I'm just so moved by how many people that I didn't know before are dedicating themselves to the natural world of which we are a part so clearly. And it's just great to be with you. So what I would like to do is share several passages with you all from this book and raise some of the issues that writing it has brought me. And then we'll have some discussion or questions, whatever you would like. I don't want to take the whole hour in just me talking. I think that Joan Malus raised some really great questions, and I love the way she has moved into activism. And so I want to talk about that some more with you. Let's see if I can make this work. Whoops, sorry. So this is actually where I am right now. I'm on the landward side of St. Vincent National Wildlife Refuge, which you can see across the water and which I can see outside my window, though it's not sunrise right now. And so I wanted to place you there so that you can picture what I'm going to show you and know a little bit about what it looks like. I floated in my kayak on the azure gulf near a place where least terns nest on the shore. These are least terns. I know you have them up in coastal New England, and they are just now returning from their wintering grounds in the Caribbean and South Florida to nest and mate and raise their chicks. So they're very touchy about being disturbed. And so I chose a distance in my kayak that would not disturb a pair of courting birds standing on the shining sand. The female shirred her wings, fluttering soft and receptive like a dove, and the male stood before her. His bill pinched a living fish the size of a soup spoon. As he moved his head side to side to tempt his mate, the last angling of the sun struck the body of the fish, and it appeared that the tern offered elemental silver to his mate. She accepted his nourishment, both actual and ritual. Fish dies into bird, bird fertilizes an egg, and life proceeds through the intricate lovemaking of terns and the sacrifice of small fish. The terns bind to one another, vowing to protect and feed a pair of chicks until they can arrow the waters from the bow of the air and confidently obtain food for themselves. So that's the chick there in the middle. Such devotion is what continues life on this planet. And for me, being close to the doings of wild birds is one of the most awesome gifts that life has given me. In Single Bird, I paired the story of that gift with the caregiving of my father, who died of complications of Alzheimer's disease in 2012. Like Joan, I have been a scientist and a wildlife educator and a writer all of my life. And in the same way as she was watching the trees, the forest disappear, I was watching the birds. And it seemed to me that there must be a new way to help people connect with what we're losing on this planet. And so eventually you'll see it made sense to me to pair these two stories. That was the chip again. At the time, my father's illness was really beginning to affect his life. I was writing books about nature in Florida and working as a wildlife biologist at the state agency. And my husband, Jeff, and I were also launching our teenage sons and making the transition to empty nesting. Up in New Jersey, my father was getting sicker and sicker. And the tipping point came when his wife, Mary Jane, had a stroke and died unexpectedly. And someone had to step up and take care of him. So Jeff and I decided we'd like to bring him to Florida. He was really a great dad, and it was not hard to be the one in the family to choose to bring him down so that we could care for him, because he had done that for us children, all of his life. But we had an ultimately unrealistic vision of how it would be to care for my father in Tallahassee. We thought that if we were thorough enough with addressing his needs, that maybe his condition would stabilize indefinitely. But we were wrong. Sitting with my dad during the last years of his life was like sitting near wild birds. To understand his needs, I had to be still and become extremely observant. It was like a meditation practice. One of the things I kept an eye on was just outside my dad's window, a rampant stand of kudzu vine having its way with the trees. I think a lot of our audience today is from New England, and I'm not sure that you have this invasive exotic plant up there. But here in the South, it's a huge problem, and it just turns forests into ghosts if it's not checked. During the years that we were there at that nursing home near our home with Dad, that kudzu climbed and smothered a small forest. Watching that and watching Dad lose his battle with the tangles and plaques of dementia, it became so clear to me that humans are doing the very same thing to the earth, smothering, taking, bulldozing, destroying. So it seems to me that the earth is the brain and the body into which we were born, and that in some nearly parallel way, we face not only a crisis in numbers of people diagnosed with dementia, 6 million in our country right now, but as a culture, we are stricken with this disease and its attending violence. For why else would we destroy knowingly the planet that sustains our very lives? The two parts of my life, my experience and then my writing, began to feel like they could be woven together. I was still working down at the coast here where I am now, keeping track of the numbers of wild birds nesting, in this case, on a small spoil island off the Apalachicola Bridge. So the spoil island is straight ahead. It's a brief paddle, but depending on the weather, sometimes easier than others. And so I would launch here and end up on this little island. A spoil island, what that is, in case you don't know, it's a place where there's a channel nearby, and in order to keep it open for boats passing, big dredges come in once or twice a year, and they spew up all this the sand and round out that channel so the boats can still get through. And that creates an island of what's called spoil. And it's actually a very good place for birds to nest because it's pretty far away from most people, and they don't They don't usually make a special effort to get there like they would to a white beach. But from this vantage point over several years, I began to pay more attention to what was happening to wild birds on a planet-wide basis. And it's the same story as Jones forests. We've lost nearly 3 billion individual wild birds since 1970. The population losses aren't restricted to rare and threatened species, but they include many widespread and common ones as well. Shorebirds, whom I adore, this is a chick snowy plover, and who are the subject of my book, are experiencing catastrophic declines. There are 40 to 70% fewer than you'd have seen 50 years ago. The second threat that I was observing more closely is climate change. In our part of the country, that manifests as coastal erosion and, of course, hurricanes and storms. And you all know that in the Department of Climate Change, we are losing badly. Scientists tell us that we are approaching carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere that haven't been seen for 15 million years. And in this year of the novel coronavirus, it occurs to me that our atmosphere is also becoming novel for our species. And we know from what we've been through this past year, with more than 500,000 people dead as a result of the virus in just the past year in our country alone, that this is this is something we have to take very seriously. We see the storms, we see the glaciers melting, at least in pictures, and we know that this is a real thing. The word dementia comes from the Latin demens, meaning madness or the irreversible deterioration of the intellectual properties of the brain. Two words, de, undoing, plus mens, the mind. That's dementia. And those who are afflicted with this disease suffer from the paradigm of perpetual growth, like the kudzu vine, the smothering of diversely beautiful and unprotected common resources. In human dementia, the losses are painfully observable. One by one, the beautiful life forces are dissolved. And so I was taking notes because that's what I was able to do in my father's room, and watching him lose all that made him such a phenomenal person in my life. Although he, unlike many dementia sufferers, he kept his sense of humor, and he knew who we were up until his death. So that was really a blessing for us. But the dementia that's affecting our culture, that belief that humans can take and consume whatever we like, just like the kudzu vine from the body of the planet, this is different from what I saw with my dad. The principal drivers of climate change and extinction and habitat loss are our economic systems, our colonialism, our tolerance of power and greed. And at the core of this, it's the tragedy that we fail to understand our true inseparability from nature, which includes all races, all species, all of the earth. And as you wrote in your email to us this morning, Lise, everyone has come at this theme in their own way, in their poetry, their art, their prose, yesterday and today. However, it's our job, because we think about the earth, because some people still think about the earth as just the environment around them and experience themselves as earth, themselves and earth as separate entities, as a source, a resource. But we can we can, and especially in the poetry today, I felt like, and yesterday too, I was thinking about Jupong's 1,000 Ways to Decolonialize. I think that was the name of her poem. And she had made 1,000 cranes and then 1,000 horseshoe crabs. And I was thinking of what a powerful way that is. I would love to help people make 1,000 snowy plovers or 1,000 swallowtail kites and bring it into our bodies even more. I think that we can make this connection because we know our bodies are constructed of the dust of stars, and they carry a memory of a time when our lives were always out under the birds, out under the spread of the sky, a time when we lived without separation. My father was dearly beloved to his family, but after all, he was a single being with a certain fate that we will all ultimately share. But Earth's biodiversity, whole populations, whole species, whole ecosystems, our very climate, these we must and can protect, at least mitigate the damage. I often think of the words of Pulitzer Prize winning Richard Powers in The Overstory, who says, "We are living at a time when claims are being made for a moral authority that lies beyond the human." We are living at a time when claims are being made for a moral authority that lies beyond the human. I believe that's what the poets and writers and artists do. And it's just now seeping into the legal system in some places like Ecuador, even down here in Gainesville, Florida. People have been trying to establish the legal rights of the Santa Fe River, where the Nestle bottling company wants to pump the springs for their profit. And it's transformation of those assumptions, that worldview, that cosmology of separation, that economy, that is the single bird that we must heal, and that I came to think of when the title of the book came to me. I think that if we can make this shift, we can redeem our species. And there's no question that each of us is called into this service, into some kind of action. What form our service, our engagement takes will be diverse. And I'm thinking about the garlic farmers today. What a beautiful, beautiful service they have provided all these years. And even reclaiming the bird feeders, that seems very important to me, and I would love to support Cheryl in that endeavor. There are just so many ways that we each can plug in. And when I think to myself, as I often do, I'm just not doing enough. All my life, I've tried to find the most way to be of use to the planet, to be of use to my family. I try to remember that whatever our form of service, our engagement, it's going to be diverse, it's going to look different, and that's how nature operates. All the little creatures that are in that sycamore tree, that sycamore lacewing that we saw, the plover chick, each one has a very specific and irreplaceable role to play. And I think that's true for each one of us as well. And then we have this immense power together to stand up, to vote, to speak, and to act on behalf of all that is sacred. And I think that people have said this over and over again, and it's my experience as well, that the earth is always speaking to us if we can open our senses to hear. This is a beach on the island that I showed you in the beginning, St. Vincent Island, and it's eroding heavily, but I've been really entranced by this stand of palm trees, because it seems to me, I know it's true, that even as the palms are inundated by salt water and they give way, you can see some in the far background, the last act, the second to last act of these palms is to bow to what is. And that's what I saw in this image. And others of them at the same time, you could see the roots in this picture. You see the roots of the palm root ball, and they hold on. They create a net of holding on that is their last act before they fall into the sea. And there's just such a, it's not even a metaphor, it's something true for us to take on and think of ourselves as doing, to create this net that is not going to let go of this beautiful place, wherever your beautiful place is, until it's absolutely your time, my time. So I'd like to close with one, before we have whatever conversation or questions we do, I'd like to close with one more reading from Single Bird, and it's about grace. Oh, there's the roots again, sorry. And in this case, it's about grace in the form of the American white pelican. I don't know if you've got them in New England, but they come down to us from the west and the far north in the wintertime. They come down in November or December, and they stay here in the Big Bend coast of the Gulf of Mexico until it's time to go back, which is about now. So I'm going to read to you about pelicans and grace. One quiet orange sunset, I stood with my husband Jeff on the beach at Indian Pass, looking out across the water. Could those be white pelicans over on the point? Asked Jeff. We'd never seen them at that particular place, loafing on the wildlife refuge with their smaller cousins, the brown pelicans. But there they were, enormous, magnificent, undeniable, enormous knobs of snowy white. Binoculars brought them close. 7 white pelicans standing at the water's edge, resting and adjusting their feathers. And if you could see them standing with the brown pelicans, they would be, the brown pelicans would only come up about to what looks like the bird's shoulder, to the top of the wings. So the white pelican really is a whole different bird. Maybe because it has to migrate so far, its body is much stronger and larger. In early spring, white pelicans depart from Florida's Gulf Coast, and they fly in long, determined squadrons to the far west, where they will nest and rear their young. We watched these unexpected holy ones prepare for that journey. And as the sun began to melt into the sea, I closed my eyes and became simply another breathing presence on the sand, no boundaries. This is how they look when they're flying. At last light, and it's a different group than we were looking at that night. At last light, the 7 gathered up into the air, fell into a lopsided V and flew directly over our heads. They flapped so close and so low, we could hear their great wings creaking. Gratitude brought me to my knees, for I have the privilege of sharing these moments with creatures I loved. In our saltwater and bones bodies, each one of us loves the birds this much. They companion us at this time on the planet, weavers of air current and nest cup. Their songs were our first music as a species. Their call notes, the first living patterns on our collective human eardrum. We learned percussion from the woodpecker, to scream from the eagle, and to sing complicated melody from the warbler and the thrush. Just as our bodies are constructed of the dust of stars, they also carry the memory of a time when our lives were always with the birds, out under the spread of the sky, when we lived without separation. Earth gives us so many chances to open wide our minds. We are invited to say, ah, we are taken quite outside of ourselves. Our consciousness enlarges and becomes permeable. Our thoughts relax and loosen their grip. In such moments, we are reminded that we are the universe in the form of the earth, in the form of the human, at this time and place on the planet. Earth asks us, what will you do in return to help this life continue? The roots and the nesting grounds of the white pelican have been extensively mapped, but we know nothing really of the intimacy of their journey, how it is decided who will fly with whom and how far to travel in a day, and why those 7 stopped in Indian Pass for just that hour. In a matter of days, the white pelicans would arrive at their summering grounds in Utah or Montana. In the urgencies of nest building and egg laying, they will not remember us standing under their leave taking of the Gulf of Mexico. But perhaps our prayers for their safe passage would in some way sustain them. The white pelican's flyover assured me that where I stood was on their map and reminded me that we share a common sacred earth, our true home and our church. This is grace, I said to Jeff. This is a grace we can trust. So thank you. Lise,
Yeah,
would you be willing to open up the questions or
sure.
comments? For sure, comments are completely great.
Should we stop sharing your picture?
Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
let's do
Okay.
that. See if I can, do I?
Here,
Yeah.
I can help.
Okay, good.
There we go.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. That was some great stories in there. So the first couple questions are easy. Claire asks, did you take these photos and can you point us to them somewhere online? They are beautiful.
The bird pictures were taken by my friend David Moynihan, and I can put into the chat his website. He's an amazing photographer, and he has taken most of the pictures. But the palms and the ones that look like a normal person's iPhone, those were me. So I will write that down. He has done the images for all of my books, and we are often out in the field together with him and his wife and see amazing things.
Let's see. Mary says that kudzu is working its way north.
Oh,
It was in Pennsylvania by 15 years ago and will probably be in New England soon as our temperatures rise. We must protect forests from this killer, as well as the forest industry.
yeah, definitely. I agree with you. You don't want that up there, although I'm sure you've got your own problems with invasives, but the South is particularly welcoming to plants that like the hot weather and the humidity that we have here, and insects as well.
Okay. Let's see. Somebody had their hand raised, but I'm not sure if it's from before. Brett, is that a question for Susan? If so, go ahead. Okay. It looks like Paul Richmond has a question.
Hi, thanks so much for that. What's your thoughts on invasives? Some people that I've known, friends, have written about saying that invasives come in for a particular purpose, that they are actually replenishing or doing something that was missing, and that's why they're thriving, because they're there and they can thrive there. Um, what's your hit on invasives in terms of that, of our battle of trying to keep them out? We have Japanese knotwood here and various things like that. So,
Well, what I've understand is that they come in, and there may be another layer of discussion to have about exotics as opposed to natives, but is that they're a result of disturbance, and that, so when forests are fragmented, that's where not just invasive vines and other plants seed and take root, but also invasive birds like cowbirds who lay their eggs in the nest of birds that are accustomed to, that require the whole forest. Like a cowbird would lay its eggs into the nest made by a Parula warbler, and then roll the Parula warbler's eggs out. And we have lots of cowbirds, but we don't have enough Parula warblers. And so I think that invasives are a problem. I also look at them. I look at how they move in waves in my own backyard in Tallahassee, because it's a neighborhood. It's a disturbed landscape, and so we see things like. And again, these are probably southern species. There's a plant called Ardesia, which has bright red berries that robins and other berry-eating birds love to eat, but it poisons them. So in that case, the Ardesia can take over the whole floodplain or wet place, or a yard that used to be a floodplain. And it basically will be a source of killing native songbirds. So to me, I don't think we can control all exotics, but I think that most of them are problems for us down here. What do you think, Paul?
I think there's so many, this conference has been great about having everybody tie into, do we listen to nature? What is nature telling us? What are we really seeing when we observe? It seems that some invasives were bringing properties where, say, I might not get this right, but concept-wise, like the nitrogen was gone, and where they grow, they bring in nitrogen again. And then the question is, okay, so are they replenishing something that had disappeared? And that's why they're there. And yes, the other ones are dying, and will they die off once? It reminds me of the mussels that came into the St. Lawrence. When they first came in, everybody was freaked out because they were basically taking over, and they cleaned up the water amazingly. But then they were worried about that there wasn't going to be any fishing, or the fish were going to really die because they were taking up everything else. And it turned out after a period of time, they overpopulated and took themselves out to some degree. And so the water was cleaned up, but there's so many things to weigh, and we can't know that, okay, Japanese knotwood is going to kill itself out before destroying everything here. Some people say we should be eating it. So I think there's a lot of complications and more things to be understood about it all, I think.
Yeah, I agree. There's a fish that's come into the Gulf of Mexico called the lionfish, and it's really poisonous if you touch it. I think maybe it might have originated in coral reef ecosystems, but down in the Keys and along the west coast of Florida, people have all kinds of cooking contests for how many ways you can catch and prepare lionfish, because they're trying hard, and the same with other species to eat it. Like we've got this huge problem with what's the name of it? It's a big snake, a constrictor that's in the Everglades now. What's it called? Oh, pythons. Yeah, Burmese pythons. And those, I don't think we could ever think that was a good thing, because they're they're even taking down alligators and native deer and climbing the trees and getting the nesting birds. So it's pretty complicated. It's something that I can't really, say a one size fits all answer.
Great. It looks like Susan Glass has a question.
Yes, it's a comment more than anything, Susan. I want to thank you for your beautiful weaving of the many concepts and talks and images of the day, from the cranes to Joan's thoughts this morning, with the whole idea of invasives and sort of this idea that, a kudzu and a dementia and a climate change and a COVID, if you will, are all invasives, even of a human sort. But on a personal note, I want to thank you because my own mother made the journey that your dad made 2 years ago, and she was very beloved to me. And I watched her dementia take things from her, like the names of flowers and the names of birds. She also never forgot who we were, but she would say things like, "What's a blackbird?" When that was something she would just know. And the ability to just go with her and answer that question gently, and just be in that space, was a lesson I have never forgotten. And she was my guide and my eyes for so much of my life. That partnership was like losing a twin. And I think that you articulate what all that kind of illness means and how we have to heal it with compassion. I think that you do that beautifully. I also loved your bird pictures, even though I couldn't see them. And I think it would be really cool if you had a sound slideshow with all those white pelicans, and we could hear all that. And thank you for it all. It's lovely.
Thank you so much, Susan. One of the things that I have been experimenting with, I have a friend who's a singer-songwriter in Taos, New Mexico. And because we were going to do some kind of event when this book came out, her name is Becky Reardon, and you all should look her up. I'll put her in the chat too. But we've done, so far we've done 3 events where we're alternating between my words and my journey with birds. It's called We Remember the Birds, and her music. And so in thinking about what you just said about weaving, and other people have said this in the day too, the more senses we can engage, voice, and we're doing the best we can given it's a virtual time. But if we can bring people in with the folding the cranes and listening to the singers and listening to the poets, our chances of actually getting deep inside are increased. So thank you for bringing that up so much. I loved your poetry. Right off.
Next, we have a question from Don Campbell. Go ahead, Don, and unmute.
Yes, well, probably more of a comment, but there's a difference between aliens and invasives. Some aliens come without causing a big kerfuffle. And now with climate change, some plants and animals will become invasive, though they're not, as might be alien to a region. So there's that. And it seems that given enough time, many of the aliens that have become invasive can find balance if given a chance and kept in balance. But if we just let them go helter skelter, that's where we have a problem. The purple loosestrife, for instance, a pretty impressive sight when you see an estuary filled with that purple. But we know that it keeps waterfowl from making use of it. And but it was sold at nurseries. When I was running a boat in the Connecticut River, or not running, interpreting on the boat, that was one of the things that came up. And the swans that were invasive.
Okay, Don, let's let Susan have a chance to respond.
Yeah, you're right. So I just, speaking about that would be lovely.
Well, I agree with you completely. I haven't seen purple loosestrife like that, but we have something called water hyacinth down here. Same kind of thing. And I got my master's in environmental horticulture a long time ago at the University of Florida, and we were trained so that we could be in the nursery industry if we wanted to. I'm also responding to the person about the native bees and pollinators. And at the time, back in the late 80s, people were planting invasives, were selling invasives, and maybe they still are. And so, you know, I remember being part of that machine that brought them out there. There is a wonderful book, but I'd actually more recommend the YouTube, by a man named Doug Tallamy. Dr. Doug Tallamy, have you heard of him, any of you? He wrote a book called Bringing Nature Home. And it has really inspired me in our yard this year to really specifically, when you can't do anything else, you can't get out very far, to figure out what's precisely native that would support these. I'm looking, I don't see who made this remark over here. Anna Warrock. To bring plants into your yard that would have been there, or that could support the native bees, butterflies, birds that want to live in your area. And that Doug Tallamy work is really helpful in doing that. And he likes to say that even a milkweed in a pot on a balcony in South Florida is useful, if that's what you can do. We can't all have a garlic farm, which we wish we could.
I'm interested in the coral. I understand a lot is dying off, and I was wondering if those efforts to farm coral work.
I do not know the answer to that. Oh, my husband's in the background, and he's more of a scientist than I am. And he says it's coming.
Okay, thank you. Somebody in the chat says they love Becky's work. And someone else says no-till gardening discourages invasives by not disturbing the soil. And Susan, do you have your hand up again, or is that left over? No, it's left over. Okay. And Paul, Paul is raised his hand. Okay.
Thank you again. I just wanted to, if you could talk just a little bit more about, a lot of folks during this whole 2 days have really been bringing in the connection to land, disease, the human body, relationships that many people don't put all those, connect them to, of like the dementia with the plants covering things. What got you to make that connection?
Well, it was just that before my dad came, I was working as a wildlife biologist and a writer. And so that was my full-time work. When he came, he needed a lot of help. I'm sure Susan Glass can, and many others can relate to that negotiating the deteriorating mind is not something you can do by yourself very well. So I ended up sitting there with him a good deal once we took care of the basics. And he had lost language, so we weren't having a lot of conversations. It was just a matter of being a writer, being in a room where it appeared that not much was going on, but in fact, a lot was happening. And in particular, what I saw was loss. And so I just took notes. I just had my journal with me. And some of the notes were things like, try to make amends with that one caregiver that he couldn't get along with, or it was, just the kinds of things you would do if you were with an elder that needed a lot of help. And then as I would go back out into the field, and be with the birds, and then be doing Christmas bird counts and other kinds of counts, and seeing the numbers decline, looking out the window at the kudzu, it just really, I felt like in a way, I didn't feel like I was wasting my time being with him, with my father at all. But I felt confined, like what can come of this small space? And it was an opportunity really to go into his process, my feelings about it, and then bring it to what I considered to be my world work, out there. So does that answer your question? It was a process.
Oh yeah, no, they're great. Thanks. And I think it's great for us to be able to tie this in because it's been mentioned so much during these 2 days, and just everyone has their own process of how they come to it. And it's great to hear how that happens, because it's not something you planned or you thought was going to happen when you brought your father or any of that, and that is what an artist experiences if you're paying attention. So thank you for.
Yeah, sure. And I don't know about you other writers, but one of the tools that I use and that I really love is it's called a Commonplace Book. And someone told me this year when I was doing the virtual book tour that a commonplace book is not a new phenomenon, but I only learned about it maybe 20 years ago. And in that, it's different from keeping a journal in that you have a beautiful book and you make it beautiful and with intention. And then you ask questions of yourself, like, what should I be doing? It doesn't seem like I'm really making the best use of my time sitting here in this room. And then, you do free writing and other kinds of writing to questions. Or you can take a line of poetry like, this is the nature, this was from Anna's poem. This is the nature of the inner life while the body goes on. Or, I wrote down all kinds of lines from poets today. And so I will go back and put a line of poetry into my current commonplace book. And then that becomes a conversation that I'm answering. I'm letting my subconscious respond to them. So I think that's been a fruitful way to pursue my writing, because I never ever have something that just comes out like a novel. It's a mosaic approach for me, which is why I should have learned how to be a poet.
I wonder if you would mind telling this story about the Paddle Fest.
Oh, sure. That's kind of a I guess it's sort of a sad one, but the spoil island that I showed you where I was counting birds at that time when I was with my dad, you don't just count the birds, you also try to protect them by posting signs that say critical nesting area, or whatever's breeding is going on there. And in other locations, I know you in New England have lots of bird stewards on your coast, and your wonderful writer John Hay wrote about that a good bit. He spent time with bird stewards, and so part of my job was not just to tally what was there, but also to educate people or to ask them to not let their dogs run through the nesting colony or whatever it was. But we lived 2 hours away from the place I was censusing. So I couldn't really do much looking out for the place in between visits, which would be like every two weeks, every week or two. And so one time it was astounding that I found like 60 or 70 least-turn nests on that site. And that was the most by far that I ever saw or that anybody had. And there were also a couple other species in there. It's beautiful black skimmers, or some of them, And I think there were some royal terns, just stunning birds. And I had my spotting scope and I'd take it over in my kayak and look. So I was really looking forward to going back the next week to see how those nests were progressing and if there were even more birds that had joined in, because birds like to nest in a colony so they can watch out for danger together. But when I came back 2 weeks later, everything was gone. All the nests were gone. All the birds were gone. And I wondered if I had imagined that they'd been there the first time. It was just so shocking to me that they were all gone. And so, you know, I went through the grief process and the rage and everything, and I just couldn't imagine what would have set them all off. And I went back to the mainland and I called the woman who was, I was submitting my data to. And she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I heard that there was going to be this thing called a paddle jam. And before I could get down there and steer them away from the spoil island, I think they all landed on there." And what it was a church that was trying to do some good stuff. They were bringing kids and families out into nature, and they were raising money. It was a fundraiser. But apparently they all landed there, and you know, nobody really saw what happened. But these terns are really flighty, and if they get seriously disturbed, they'll just go on and find another sandy place to try to nest, and they lose that whole effort, that nesting. So that was the paddle jam. And the next year we were able to educate that church not to land on that little island. And I mean, a spoil island is not a place that people really want to be, because the mud that comes out from those channels is kind of gross and stinky. But they had, and that's what happened. And shorebirds are so vulnerable in particular. You know, all birds are, but shorebirds, you know, they nest on the beach. You saw that picture of the eggs. And it's just, they really grab, that's another similarity between my dad and the shorebirds at that time to me was the vulnerability, and how sometimes it feels like you can only help one single bird at a time, like basically putting yourself in front of a nest and guiding people away from them, or sitting there with that one old person who's got a very long, slow journey, and just being with them, with that single bird. So that was that story. There's lots of those, unfortunately. But I find that most people, if they know, and most people don't know, but if people are understand what's at stake, and if you can educate them, that they will mostly honor the needs of the birds. It's just that a beach is very hard to protect, and birds, when they lay their eggs, they don't think, where is it least likely that there's going to be someone running a dog? You know, they just think, oh, this is a really great flat place that I can raise my little chicks. And the chicks need about 28 days once they hatch to, you know, so it's a fairly long process to really fledge and be able to take care of themselves. But it's a worthy endeavor.
Let's see, we have a comment from B, who said that she wrote down the phrase spoil island. So you're helping other poets.
Good. Good. The poets sure are helping me.
Yeah, Jupong put the correct title of her poem in the chat. Let me go back here. 1,000 Gifts of Decolonial Love by Jupong Lin.
I can't wait to find that poem. Is it in the anthology?
No.
No,
No,
yeah,
but there's
It's
some
not, but
other.
I'll put a link in the chat
oh, thank you
of
so
the
much.
place where it's published.
Thank you so much.
Great. Let's see, you've got some. Don Campbell says, "Amen." I think he's talking about protecting the birds for a while. And someone else still is hoping that you'll put the photo link into the
Oh,
chat.
oh, I
If
put
you
the
press-
name.
If you press type answer, you can type it in.
I did put the name of the photographer in the Q&A, but I'll put it in the.
Oh, I mean the Q&A, yeah.
I think I
Apparently
did.
it's not, okay.
I'll do it. Yeah, I see the Massachusetts shoreline. Yeah, we are a highly flawed species, Don Ogden. You're right about that.
Well, oh, here we go.
Oh, it's in dark matter. I love-
That's great. You two both know Lisa Weil.
oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. It's just in the most recent issue.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a powerful publication, isn't it?
Yep.
Yes, it is.
We'll say the name for everybody, darkmatterwomenwitnessing.com. And that's all one word.com.
So I'm going to type the name of the photographer again. And then his website, I believe it's just davidmoynihan.com, and it's really quite amazing.
Okay. Well,
Thank you
you
so much for having me.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's nice to travel south for a little bit.
It's really beautiful here right now, but we'll be wishing we were up there in the come June or July.
Okay. Thank you very much, Susan.
You're welcome, Lise. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yay.